welcome everybody to this week's episode of the Photoshop Quick Tips podcast. In this week's episode, I'm going to be taking you through how to create a very interesting black and white portrait effect inside of Photoshop. So the first thing I want to do here is I'm going to grab my lasso tool, and I'm just going to make a selection around the color part of her eyes. Something kind of like that. And holding down Shift to add to my selection, just select that portion right there. Then I'm going to come up to the select menu and choose feather. And I'm going to choose a radius of 2 just to give it a little slight feather. And then I'm going to inverse my selection by holding down Shift Command or Shift Control and I on my keyboard, because the effect I'm getting ready to apply, I only want to apply to everything except the colored part of her eyes. So now I'm going to come down to the adjustment layer icon and choose Hue and Saturation. In the Hue and Saturation dialog box, I'm simply going to drag the saturation slider all the way to the left to desaturate it. And I'm going to push the lightness down as well, maybe to about -5. And click OK. So now all I have is a black and white portrait with the blues of her eyes still shining through. So what I want to do now is create a composite of this image on top of the other layers in the layers palette. So in order to do this, I'm going to hold down Shift, Option, Command, and E on my keyboard, or if you're working on a PC, it would be Shift, Alt, Control, and E to create a flattened copy of your layers on top of the others. And I'm going to come up here to the filter menu, choose Blur, Gaussian Blur. In the Gaussian Blur dialog box, I'm going to set my radius to 15. Since I'm working with a low resolution image, I can get away with a radius between 10 and 20. If you're working with a higher resolution image, you would want this to be between 25 and 30. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK now. And I'm also going to lower this layer's opacity to about 35%, just to give it a nice soft focus feel. Then I'm going to come down here and add a layer mask to this layer. And I'm going to grab my brush tool, making sure I have a soft edge brush, making sure black is my foreground color, and making sure that I have the layer mask thumbnail selected. I'm just going to brush out the blur from her eyes and her mouth, just to kind of bring back some of those distinguishing characteristics of the face. So it just kind of gives it a nice soft focus feel everywhere but the eyes, so you're really drawn to her eyes. Next, I'm going to create another flattened copy of this image by using my shortcut Shift, Option, Command, and E, or Shift, Alt, Control, E. And what I'm going to do with this layer is I'm going to change its blend mode to multiply. And then I'm going to use Command or Control J to duplicate that layer just to create an even darker image. And then I'm going to use Command or Control E to merge those layers together. And then I'm going to add another layer mask to that particular new layer that we have there. Now I'm going to grab my rectangular marquee tool and just draw out a selection right around her face, something kind of like that. And then I'm going to come up here to the select menu, choose feather, and I'm going to have a radius of 50 pixels this time. 50 pixels for low resolution image, 100 to 150 for a higher resolution image. Click OK. And then making sure I have my layer mask thumbnail selected and black is my foreground color, I'm just going to give it a little Option Delete or Alt Backspace on the keyboard to fill that portion of the layer mask with black. And then Command and Control D will deselect. And there you have a nice, simple, high contrast, split tone portrait in just a few short and easy steps. So that's it for this episode of Photoshop Quick Tips. If you have any questions or comments on this episode, please post them on the blog site at www.photoshopquicktips.com. I want to remind everybody that the pre-sales for my DVD will end on December the 1st. So you have about a week left to go ahead and order the DVD and get the $5 discount, because once they start shipping, the price will go up to $29.95. So be sure to pick up your copy of the Photoshop Quick Tips DVD by going to the store link at photoshopquicktips.com. Thanks very much for everyone for watching, and I'll see you next week.